والصلاة والسلام على أشرف خلقه وخاتم أنبيائه وسيد رسله سيدنا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع ذنوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المطهرين المكرمين. قال الله العظيم في كتابه الكريم وهو أحسن القائلين وأصدق الصادقين: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وأنكحوا الأيام منكم والصالحين من عبادكم وإمائكم إن يكونوا فقراء يغنهم الله من فضله. آمنا بالله. صدق الله العلي العظيم. For the purification of the souls, the enlightenment of the hearts, the acceptance of the deeds, and for the hastening of the reappearance of Baqiyatullah al-A'zam Ruhi wa Arwahul Alameen lahu al-Fida. Enlighten your souls and the atmosphere with the recitation of salawat upon Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. Respected elders, sisters and brothers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. I want to get married, but is a sentence that so many people have been uttering and presenting as one of the challenges that our communities are facing, especially in the Muslim world. When it comes to the subject of finding a spouse or settling down in a marital relationship, there is a mounting of evidence that exists out there that there are a number of obstacles and potential hurdles that people are facing in this important path. And people are often wondering, why is it becoming more and more difficult, and why are there more challenges regarding this noble objective? The idea that, of course, most of us are aware of is the position of the religion of Islam with regards to this important relationship. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Holy Quran advises us and gives us clear instructions that it is something that you and I need to strive to establish, but also to protect. And the Prophet of Islam, Rasul al-A'zam Mohammed sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, famously says, "Ma buniya fil Islami bina'un ahabbu ila Allahi min at-tazwij." There is no institution in Islam that has been presented more beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than, of course, marriage. And it's interesting that you find that the first relationship Allah tabarak wa ta'ala presents to you and I is that of marriage. Adam and Hawa as a married couple. He could have, for example, presented to us a family unit, or an individual by himself. Adam alayhi salam, first by himself, and then later he would get married. But the first creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was indeed a unit that is formed out of this marriage. Similarly, the Islamic teachings point to its importance regarding fulfilling and maintaining spirituality and connection with Allah, that the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam have said, "Man tazawwaja faqad ahraza nisfa dineh, falyattaqillaha fi nisf al-akhar," that whomsoever gets married will preserve half of their faith, then let them look after the other half. So likewise, the prayer of somebody who is married is 70 times more rewarding than the individual who is a bachelor or is single. And those who die and they're married are received by the malaika and the angels better than the ones who don't. The hadith says, "Man ahabba an yalqa Allah tahiran mutahharan falyulqihi bizawjah." Anyone who wants Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept them in a purified state, they need to leave this world having this important relationship. Now, having said that, and we are all aware of this importance, there are many people in this community and many other communities who have come to me and said that we are facing a number of obstacles, that the goal of marriage is theoretically nice, but in reality there are a number of difficulties that people are actually facing. And these ones, we need to tackle them practically in order to be able to find solutions and actually look for evidence on how we can improve the state of our communities in this particular regard. One of the major issues that some people have, and the youth also present, is the rise in divorce cases in the community, and of course the worry that some people have that this could end up in a broken home or a relationship that does not necessarily last. And this is something that exists in many communities, many societies. We don't have any statistics about the Muslim community or the Shia community in the United States or anywhere else in particular. We don't really have any evidence that there is a rise, so to speak, in divorce rates, although it is shown to be the case overall in the United States or in Europe to be the case, and by therefore projection of looking at the Muslim community, it's possible that that is also being witnessed as well. Now, before discussing these challenges, and I want the discussion tonight to be more practical in terms of what's stopping our youth and our sons and daughters from going forward and getting married. What are the obstacles that they're facing? Before that, I'd like to present to you the important realization in regards to the two lenses of what marriage is. Lens is the spiritual lens and the moral lens, which I've just described. Its importance for the building of the character of the human being, its importance in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But there's another lens, which is the jurisprudential lens. Please understand this, because some people, unfortunately, are delaying their marriage for a number of reasons that I will explain, but do not understand that there is a fiqhi aspect regarding this. What do we mean? Our ulama have said that marriage at the first level is highly recommended. It's a recommended process to go through. It's one that brings thawab from Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala, because it's a matter that's pleased to Him Jalla wa ala. However, they say in certain cases, and I believe in the majority of cases in the Western world, when people reach a certain age, it becomes wajib, it becomes obligatory. Meaning what? Meaning that if somebody refuses to get married or delays marriage unnecessarily and does not go and perform it, then they are committing sin. And how many sins they're committing? The more they delay it, the more the sins are accumulating. And those particular individuals are those that without marriage are falling into sin. Meaning what? And you read this sometimes in books of fiqh and jurisprudence, and people think that falling into sin means performing physical acts, for example, adultery and fornication. Whereas the reality of the situation is falling into sin without marriage means of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If an individual is refusing zawaj and marriage, and God forbid they are looking at that which they're not supposed to, if they're having relationships, even that's not physical, that they're not supposed to, with the opposite gender. And by the way, you might find this challenging, and these subjects I don't speak about when there's kids, so it's a difficult one, but I'll have to be a bit more reserved. But I receive messages from boys and girls who say because they can't get married, they even begin, due to the corrupt nature of the environment, think about. And today I received a message from an email from somebody who said to me, you know, I'm in my teenage years, I'm 16, 17. I know I can't get married, but you know, I like to read books about relationships with the same gender. So he's a boy, and he said, you know, I'm just reading, I'm not going to do it. I just find it enjoyable. And this, unfortunately, has been anecdotally shown in countries where they stamp down on women being out there or being seen. The rise of homosexuality was seen in some societies where people weren't able to, for example, pick a spouse in an appropriate manner, and there was a clampdown on women that were well present in society generally, that they were told you have to stay at home, etc., etc. So it has many potential pitfalls. So the first message is for the youth, both boys and girls, and that is, if an individual is finding themselves in the state where, God forbid, They are being influenced by social media, by movies, by Hollywood, sometimes Bollywood, anything else, in order to fall into sin and have temptations, then it's no longer a matter of choice. It's no longer, you know what, whenever I am in my 40s or 50s, or if the parents don't know this, which are, we will discuss, an obstacle, a major obstacle in developing and helping these relationships to take place, they also need to know. They also need to be aware that this matter is serious. That if an individual refuses zawaj and they are unfortunately doing things which are haram, then what? Or even looking or doing anything that constitutes sinful, then of course they need to be helped into this marriage process. Now, I'm going to go through at least 10, and I need your attention, based on research and asking people, some of the common issues some of our youth are facing when they come to choose a spouse or to establish themselves or settle down in a marital relationship. The first thing, and this is not in order of importance, these are just some reasons that we would like to find solutions and together work as a community to try and find out what's going on. Why are we not in the position whereby, for example, these are being solved? One of the first things that we hear and see is sometimes the soft war on marriage that's happening on social media. Most of you may have heard of the term soft war. It's used in political science. It was developed in the United States, actually. And it's a tool that's used to influence people without the use of weapons or force. So mass media, social media, other tools are used so that people begin to accept ideas and concepts, and it's much less costly. It will be much more effective. So people will start to believe things and accept things all of a sudden through subtle messages and carefully worded ideas and concepts on movies and, for example, soap operas and clips and so on and so forth. In my understanding of what's going on out there today, we see that marriage is presented as a very negative concept through a humorous demonstration of continuous issues that are out there, that people just watch clip after clip and they laugh, but it's sending a very negative idea in people's minds. I'll give you examples. Today, if you look at the rise of these social media influencers who are couples, and they do these clips together as couples, and they're very, very short, by the way, right? They're very short. What do? For example, they would show a husband watching TV by himself, and all of a sudden the wife comes in, and then, for example, there is a caption that says, when the wife doesn't leave the husband to do anything, and then she says to him, why are you watching TV? You need to stand up and do the dishes. Or why do you do this? And people then, think, yeah, that's so true. Or, for example, I've seen these clips copied by so many of these couples that do these jokey marriage clips. The wife says to her husband, if I die, will you ever marry someone after me? So he says to her, no, I'm not even thinking about that. She says, no, surely you have to think about this. Just tell me, hypothetically, would you? He says, come on, I'm not really into it. She says, I'm sure you'll be fine. You need to marry someone. He says, are you sure? She says, yes. He says, yeah, fine. I'm thinking maybe I'll marry from this community. Then she gets really angry. So you're thinking about getting married already? And he says, but honestly. And then the clip finishes. What kind of image is this giving to our youth and others who are watching and are saying marriage is full of hardship, difficulty, pain, fights, people tricking each other, right? It's subtle to try and make people, I remember the Time magazine published an article, I still have it, I reserved it. The Time magazine published an article that said, things you must do before you die. Is it called bucket list? Yes? Only the sisters know. The brothers are thinking buckets are used for water. Things you must do before you die. It says number one. Do you know what the number one thing Time magazine says you need to do before you reach Alam al-Barzakh? Try living alone. Don't be with somebody. Try alone, living alone. It's sold as very attractive. It's sold as something that needs to be practiced. Yes, I remember seeing a clip that somebody, a wife, a husband is about to die, and he is next to, his wife. So he says to her, I am forbidding you from getting married after me. When I die, you're not allowed to get married. She says, please don't say this. Inshallah, Allah gives you long life. And it's not good. Next day, he says to her, listen, you're not marrying anyone after me when I die. She says, please stop saying this. It's negativity. It's not good. He keeps repeating it until she lost it with him. One day, until he told her, listen, you're not marrying anyone, are you? She says, wait, you die first and then we'll see what happens. Stop telling me this, The idea is that sometimes these kind of depictions are also, when I read sometimes about even humorous stories that happens between husband and wife, I sometimes, laugh about them, but they do have an impact. Like, for example, they say a couple were fighting once, and the person who tried to help them later to solve their problems would say to the wife, how do you deal with your husband when you have arguments? How do you calm down? How do you make the situation better? She said, I always do one thing when we have fights as husband and wife, always. He says to her, what do you do? She says, I go immediately and clean the bathroom, restroom. That's my method. When we have a fight, I immediately go and clean the restroom. He says to her, how is that calming you down? How does that control your anger? She's very easy. Every time I do it, I use his toothbrush. Sadly, you may think that this is the kind of thing that is out there, but it's unfortunately existing, and one that shows a particular challenge that we're facing. I remember reading that once there was a couple who went on a vacation. And when they went to vacation, it was reported in the news that the husband, unfortunately, was caught in a shop, in a store, having stolen a tin that had peaches in it. He just put it in his pocket and left somewhere in a vacation, some island. So the police caught him and took him to court and said that you will now have to be tried for this because they're a very safe area. So the judge said, listen, because you've stolen a can of 5 peaches, you're going to be imprisoned for 5 days because it has 5 peaches. He said, okay. At the moment he was about to stand up, his wife stands up and says to the judge, Your Honor, I have to tell you, he also stole a can of peas as well. Yes? Sometimes in these kind of situations, you see the depiction that's given is that the wife is always in conflict with her husband, right? You never hear of these wonderful stories, and even you see these couples that are somehow showing that they're loving each other, all of a sudden they're divorced on social media or so on and so forth. So, what are the main challenges that we have to talk about? The first, and again, in addition to this, is the usage of faith and Islam to stop our kids to marry. Who uses Islam to stop their kids to marry? Many parents and some couples themselves. Example of this is the incorrect usage of istikhara. Please understand this because this is relevant in this community and in many other communities. Which is what? There is a common practice amongst certain people, and that is before they about to commence to find somebody, prospective wife or husband for their son or daughter, they immediately go forward to do an istikhara. Or they ask an alim, Sayyidina, Sheikhna, we want an istikhara. And should we go and find out about this girl? It's not even a proposal. Or find out about this boy, for example. Yes? Incidentally, this could be strange for some people. But today we are also living in a society or a time where we need to rethink some of the old cultural practices which limit the potential marriages. Meaning what? Today, it's usual for the man to ask a particular female, which is normally the case in order to get to know them. Yes? And that's been the case for maybe centuries. Why is it difficult to accept the potential for a girl who wants to get married to ask her dad if she has found to get to know him? What's the problem in that? Many people say that's not befitting for a girl, because a girl needs to be waiting for someone to come and knock the door and ask for her hand or get to know her. But it's interesting that Sayyidah Khadija salamullahi alayha asked for the Prophet to what? To get to know her so that they would get married. I will give you an interesting fact. It was not only Khadija salamullahi alayha. It was Amina, the mother of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him and his family, whose father sent a message to Abdul Muttalib, the grandfather of the Holy Prophet, and Abdullah, requesting if Amina can get married to Abdullah. And that was in 7th century Arabia, where such a thing was unheard of, not 21st century United States or in the Western world. Yes? In the recognition that sometimes we need to break these taboos because they are a limiting area. Limiting. Why couldn't, for example, a lady, if she, for instance, feels that she's ready for marriage, goes and, with the permission of her parents, for example, asks if a particular person, in a polite manner, is interested to get to know her for marriage. And if the person says no, no problem. There's nothing in Islam that goes against this, right? So, one area that unfortunately is happening is the incorrect usage of istikhara. Meaning what? There are people out there that are resorting to istikhara for marriage, and it shouldn't be done in these cases. Meaning what? Istikhara has its role in the position of people when they are completely confused and they're not sure. But the idea of stopping a potential marriage just because you have to do an istikhara. Once I said to a family, and the boy called me and said, you know, me and the girl really are compatible with each other, and we are very happy to proceed, but there was an istikhara that was done and it came out bad, and we're both heartbroken. So what do we do? So I called the father and I said, listen, this is a potential marriage. Oh, but Allah doesn't want it to happen. I said, why did you do the istikhara in the first place? Because we have always done it this way. Because our parents always did it this way. And that's what the Quran says, by the way. When the prophets always went to these people, said, why are you worshipping idols? Oh, but our parents used to. Our ancestors used to. If your forefathers used to do istikhara before marriage, it doesn't mean you have to either as well. And istikhara for an individual who is nearly sure that the person is the right person for them is not necessarily a good one to take. It's not something that we are encouraging. We're not encouraging this whatsoever. It's unfortunate that it's stopping so many potential marriages that are taking place. I'm not against istikhara as a principle. But the number of people who are unfortunately prevented from marrying because maybe the istikhara is done incorrectly. Maybe it's done at a place where it shouldn't be. And by the way, istikharas are not binding anyway. Meaning what? Meaning that, can I go against it? Yes, you can. Although some of the ulama says it's not recommended to do so, but it's not haram. Pay some sadaqah and you could go against it. But in marriage itself, it is not recommended. Not something you should do. Even if your forefathers did, it's not, unless you are absolutely not sure if the person is the right person, after getting to know them, after investigating their family, then maybe that's something that could be done. Second issue that some people have is finances. They say, I don't want to get married, or I'm not in a position to get married, even though I think I need to, but I can't afford it. It's very expensive. And this is compounded by the fact that there are expectations such as people having to own houses or really nice cars or having very well paid jobs, or for example lavish weddings, high dowries. These are, and you know why this is happening? Because it's about keeping up I can't say with the Joneses, and I don't want to use any surnames out there. It's about keeping up with other families. Oh, you know what? That person had an amazing... Sometimes I get these wedding invitations. They're like a book, which is designed so nicely, and it's just for a wedding invitation. That nowadays people are sending invitations electronically, which is great, but there are still people who send these really expensive wedding invitations, or they have to spend tens of thousands on different gatherings for the wedding, which is making it very difficult for our youngsters to settle down when they're young. And the expectations are so high. In addition to this, and remember this, some people who are young means the early 20s or late teens, and they're saying, I don't have any money. We have the Holy Prophet, Rasul al-A'zam, Mohammed sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. In a narration that is found from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says, من ترك التزويج مخافة الفقر فقد أساء الظن بالله. If you leave marriage because of poverty or fear of poverty, then you have thought badly of your Lord. You have thought badly of your Creator. This is one of the worst things, to think negatively of Rabb al-Alameen, right? Someone once came to the Holy Prophet and said, Ya Rasulullah, I need money. Please, dua or something to help me become rich. So someone comes to you and says, I want to become rich, or I want to gain money. What advice would you give them normally? So the Prophet said to him, Tazawwaj, get married. So the man said, what? He went, came back again, same thing. What can I do? He said, get married twice, 3 times, until the person said, if the Prophet's telling me 3 times, I've got to get married. So he gets married. After he gets married, he goes and sells wood. He just brings wood from anywhere and sells it. When he sells it, he gets enough money to buy an axe. He goes and buys an axe and chops even more wood, and then he gets even more money. So he comes to the Holy Prophet and says, Ya Rasulullah, look at how much money I have. The Prophet says to him, Alam aqul laka tazawwaj? Did I not tell you get married? إن يكونوا فقراء يغنهم الله من فضله. Allah gives a promise in the Quran, and Allah speaks the truth. If you are in need, you get married, Allah will give you more. It's not a matter of trusting this dunya. It's a matter of trusting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So those who are thinking, but it needs the help of families and it needs the help of spouses, and not necessarily them putting a massive shopping list or high expectations before them. The other challenge that is out there today is sadly the issue of expectations regarding certain matters that people are not really in control of. Like, I'll be honest with you, the influence of certain TV, soap operas, Turkish or whatever, on the way people look, right? And the way that people present themselves, their height, their look. So there are people who are becoming very picky because all they see is things close to perfection on TV, lots of makeup, lots of stuff. So they're having these high expectations, and therefore they keep delaying marriage until they find that perfect person who matches their theoretical model of how their husband or wife should be, based on them imagining that in the fake world, right? So sadly, this will further delay and make unrealistic the marriage if people are not really on this ground and recognizing what truly is out there, and it's not how it's depicted on these movies and on these soap operas and indeed social media. Likewise, one of the challenges that I think some of the youth themselves put themselves in is when they choose to put their careers first. And I'm going to be quite blunt here, and I need your attention, because there is an unfortunate endemic that is happening in our communities. Please understand this. And that is the number of our sisters who are in their 30s and in our 40s who are not married. And they are increasing in many communities that I've traveled to. The same complaints are being presented. And I'm not blaming them at all in that sense. Partly they are to blame, partly. But it's the blame of the men also, because many men aren't interested in girls who are in their 30s. Partly the blame is for the parents. Partly the blame is for society. There are many reasons. But one of the issues after asking so many of them, is that they've decided that I need to first graduate, I need to work, I need to be independent, then I'll think about marriage. And by the time they're in their late 20s and the early 30s, they start thinking about marriage, and then there are problems. I'm not saying that this is impossible, but it becomes even more difficult, unfortunately, wrongly, for people in that age category. And we need to be supportive of them, help them, assist them. But sadly, society sometimes, and the different cultures throw in these kind of, unfortunately, not necessarily true statements, like they will likely have less children, or they can't have kids when they're in their 30s as much, which scientifically hasn't really been established as much. But the key thing here is there is needs a coordination, that sometimes it's okay that I can continue to get education and work whilst I'm married. And there are many, probably brothers need to be in that tune as well. Parents need to be supportive of that kind of thinking too. It doesn't mean that the moment you get married you have to have kids and you can't then practice your profession or continue your studying. There are many who would be willing for that to take place. But to close this door and to say I'm not even entertaining this idea, and do you know who does this primarily? Parents. I know parents who don't even tell their daughter, if there is a prospective husband or somebody who's come to get to know them, la, she's studying, sorry, she's not ready to get married now, she's this, she's that. By the way, there is a fatwa here of His Eminence Ayatollah Sistani Hafidhullah, you need to know. If a father rejects the approach of a boy without a legitimate Islamic reason, for example, by just doing istikharas, he will lose his authority as a wali of the girl. So then she can marry without his permission. I give you an example. During COVID, I was contacted by a sister who's Lebanese. She said to me, I've got to know through work a brother who has become 4 years ago a Shi'i Ithna Ashari, follower of the Ahl al-Bayt, but he is from the Caribbean, so he's of the darker complexion. My father is saying no, because he's not Lebanese. So please speak to him. So I contacted him. He said to me, you know, I don't know whether he's got good iman. I don't know whether he's a good Muslim. I said, Haji, don't worry. What I'll do is I'll sit with him and I'll test him. Yes? I couldn't sit with him. I did a Zoom. That's the closest we could do at that time, right? I asked him a lot of questions. I wanted to find out about his faith, and mashallah, he reads, he was, he's practicing. So I went back to him. I said, Haji, Azizi, he is somebody who's this. I asked him, he's this. He seems a decent person. So what I'm asking you to do, not to accept him as a son-in-law, but sit with him. Ask him. You'd investigate. Give him a chance. He said, no way. He is not Lebanese. It's not happening. It's not happening. Right? Incidentally, this happens in many communities, because once there was a Khoja brother who wanted to marry an Iraqi sister, and the father, who is a doctor, Allahu Akbar, one of the best apparently in London, consultant, big guy. 4 ulama contacted him. 4th one was not an alim, a student like me. And I said to him, your daughter really wants to get married to this Khoja boy. I know him, he's a good boy. He's a good person, good akhlaq, good deen. He said to me, Wallah, and I am responsible for what I'm about to say. He said, Wallah, if he was a Nabi, I would not get him married unless he's Iraqi. This is what he said to me. This was about 5 years ago, by the way. I'm not that ancient. Yes? In the realization that these are current problems. Now what happened with this girl? She said to me, no. I'm getting married to him. I don't care. What does Islam say? I say, Islam says you have authority. If the father is rejecting of the idea of race only, he doesn't have a legal Islamic jurisdiction to say no. So she ended up marrying him without the father's permission. And he never attended the nikah. I'm not encouraging this. I'm not supporting this to happen. I'm saying don't let it reach that position for the fathers. Don't let it reach that position where your decision is based on cultural feelings only. Yes? Similarly, another reason why unfortunately some of our youngsters are suffering is when it comes to issues to do with age and restriction based on the way parents think. This is a sensitive topic, so I'd like your attention just for a few more minutes, because I'm not here to bash the parents. I think parents are in a very good position. Many a times they need to be listened to because they have the experience and they would like their best for their daughter over their son. But what is happening out there is parents are becoming very dismissive because they probably in the mentality of how they were raised or what they went through, so they don't want their kids to go through in a similar fashion to what they endured. So sometimes they say my son or daughter is too young. Sometimes they say that immature. Sometimes they don't even discuss it. Sometimes they dismiss the need of their daughter, of their husband, or their son to start the process of finding a prospective partner for themselves. Sometimes they allow culture to dictate their understanding of how things could be. Sometimes they don't look at it from the perspective of how it should be for the benefit of their sons or daughters, but from their own benefit. Right? So they might, yes, prefer from the same culture. Wallah, she has to be from Basra. Wallah, she has to be from Karachi. He has to be from Kandahar or Kabul, etc., etc. Has to be from that city, otherwise no. And there is this big issue which affects some people in this community, but mainly other communities. And that's the Sayyid, non-Sayyid marriages. You know, I say it honestly. I have no issue because I've made videos on it and alhamdulillah I've received many la'nas from Shias for it. I'll say it honestly. There are people who are putting their own feelings above Islam, which is what? Maulana, my daughter is Alwiya, I am a Sayyid. No way would I marry a non-Sayyid. Who told you? Which religion is this? Which madhab is this? Give me a hadith from the Ahl al-Bayt. Give me one proof from the Maraji' that say if your daughter is Sayyida or Alawiyya, the husband has to be Sayyid. Oh, but this is how we used to do it. Aha. Now that's the reason you want to block a potential marriage. It happens big in certain communities. If I say this, definitely they'll drag me out. I know which communities they are. And I've said it in some places. Because they prefer culture over religion in these cases. And culture has a role in marriage without a shadow of a doubt. In some practices, the culture is there and Islam doesn't say anything. Like I give you out of humorous, in the Iraqi community, I could say it because I'm Iraqi, so I'll get away with it. In the Iraqi community, for example, in the nikah ceremonies, when the scholar asks for permission from the girl, usually the girl is behind the door or she's in a room and the scholar is outside. He comes, he asks her permission so that he then marries her to a boy whom she's agreed. So the idea is he says to her in Arabic that I am here, I am about to conduct your nikah, please say yes if you're happy for me to represent you. In the Iraqi community, it is frowned upon and strongly discouraged and not allowed for her to say yes immediately. Why? Because they say if you say yes quickly, means you're desperate to get married and you shouldn't be. That's fine. So how many times should the alim repeat this? Maulana, 14 times. Why? 14 ma'soomeen. Thank God they didn't think of the prophets. Otherwise we'll be there for years. And I remember once sitting in front of in a house asking, هل ترضين أن أكون وكيلا عنك لإجراء العقد? I'm here to conduct the marital nikah for you. And the parents told me, the father said to me, she will answer after 5 times because of Ashabul Kisa. I said, amazing. That's 10 minutes saving for me, no problem. So after the 5th time, when the 5th time happened, I was waiting for her response. She needs to say, Na'am, anta wakil. Yes, you are my representative. She didn't say anything. So I'm waiting. Minute, 2 minutes. So I start knocking on the door. Not me, the father. I says to her, Yalla, jawbi, answer. Why are you not answering? The mother comes out after 2 minutes and says, Sheikh, we're so sorry. We've changed our minds. We want 14, please. It happens. Now these things, are they problematic? Not really. It's just for people like me having to be a bit more patient. They don't necessarily impact the whole process, but there are other things that do impact marriage and we have to talk about them. Have proper conversations and workshops regarding these. So, as far as our parents, the parents are concerned, they need support and encouragement, but they need to also take advice from ulama. And they shouldn't be a hurdle to the marriage of their daughters and their sons. Rather, they should be supporting it as much as possible and encouraging through financial support. But if they see that their kids are not mentally ready, then they should help them to become mentally ready. But they should not compare their lives with the lives of their kids, but rather look at the situation in the Western world. There's so much, unfortunately, fornication, boyfriend-girlfriend relationships, and challenges that may not have happened back home as well. What about sushi marriages? And these are not marriages that happen on a sushi restaurant. They are marriages between Sunni and Shia. Our ulama are of the following opinion. Jurisprudentially, it's allowed, but it's strongly discouraged. It's not a matter for us to say, go for it. And I'm telling you from my own personal experience, what happens is, and you know, the number of boys and girls who are at school, college, university are finding people who are not followers of Ahl al-Bayt is on the rise, because they're coming across them and then they fall in love and all that kind of business, right? So what's happening out there? The problem is marriage already has many challenges, and it can be a wonderful relationship, one that ascends the individual to great stations, but it comes with its hardships as it is. And with people having different beliefs, it becomes even more difficult. And yes, there are many, many different beliefs between Sunnis and Shias, and we need to appreciate that and acknowledge that. And the more religious an individual is, the more problems will happen. Okay? Now, I'm going to quickly summarize a number of other reasons, and we need to, inshallah, think of potential solutions. And one challenge is the existence of older siblings, children who are not married, brothers or sisters. And some people say, I want to get married, but my older brother is not married, or my older sister is not married, right? So I need solutions for this. And it's very important that we do not have this as an obstacle, because if there's no religious basis for it, there's nothing wrong with somebody getting married if their older sibling is not married. People have different choices in life, and once again, the parents need to be cognizant of this. Now, how to find a prospective husband and wife is one of the biggest challenges that people have today. And this is a subject by itself that requires a lengthy discussion, but I'm just going to throw in a few ideas that exists out there. And that is, people say, I don't know where to find somebody. I want to get married. These challenges I can overcome, obstacles I can remove, but how do I find somebody who's suited for me? And the answer to this lies in a number of different ways. Number one, friends. To contact friends and to be open and confident and not worried about their perception or anybody's perception. Both boys and girls, there's nothing wrong with asking relatives or friends, I want to get married, please, do you know somebody? Go through your phone list. Sometimes you'll be surprised. Secondly, we need more of our sisters and brothers in our communities to step up and become matchmakers for the sake of Allah. People who are trained to understand what is good, and people who are available all across the United States, not only in Virginia or Maryland or DC or this area, but rather open up to be able to know that there are many people in other communities who are maybe not well known and are looking for prospective husbands or wives for their sons or daughters. At the same time, there are some events, but these events need to be coordinated by ulama and need to be in a controlled environment where there is the respect of Islamic teachings, and it's not necessarily a free-fall mixing event, but one that can be made possible and halal through acceptable ways of getting to know each other. Right? So sometimes if there are sessions or gatherings whereby people are able to see each other and have general discussions, not marriage related, this could be also potentially a viable option as well. The key thing and the message that I'd like to give to my sisters and brothers, those who are looking to get married, is always be positive. Don't allow the shaitan to influence your heart and say, no, I'm not ready, or there are many problems, or constantly thinking negative about marriage, be positive and hopeful and optimistic, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will actually facilitate the process for you. Final thing that I'd like to mention, and mashallah, the sisters are extremely restless today for some reason. Maybe it's the food courts outside that they'd love to eat, but the brothers are not hungry at all. And this is an important message, my dear sisters and brothers, based on years of facilitating marriages, but also dealing with problems between husband and wife. So I need your attention for a couple of minutes. Many people, when they come to marriage, whatever they've read or whatever they've seen or their parents' own experiences. And they get into marriage and they get the shock of their lives. Why? Why do they get the shock of their lives? Because of a lack of training and education and awareness of what marriage entails, the rights and responsibilities, as well as, please understand this, the difference between males and females, the way Allah has created them. I'll give you an example. Those of you who are married can relate to this. Those who are not, get ready for this. If a husband comes back from work and his wife is really upset at home, she's like really upset. Imagine this scenario. The husband comes in, he says to his wife, "Is everything okay?" She looks at him and says, "Yeah, everything is fine." He says, "Okay." And he moves away. First mistake, right? Because the wife wants you to press her for you to show that you really care and that you know there's something wrong, right? So the first mistake he's done is immediately dismissed her problems or issues that she's having. Why? Because a male-male relationship, as friends are concerned, is essentially based on solution-orientated processes. Meaning what? Meaning that if I see a friend of mine who's a male, who's upset, I say to him, "Is he okay? Are you okay?" And he says, "Yeah, I'm fine." That's a cue for me to say, "Don't ask me anymore," as a male. But for a female, if she says to you, and she doesn't look okay, and she says to you, no, I'm okay," it's a cue for the husband to say, no, there's something wrong. You've got to tell me what's wrong. It's different. Allah has created males and females differently. Now imagine if I don't know this and I get into marriage, immediately problems happen. Now, imagine this brother, mashallah, he's read and listened to lectures. He knows that his wife is not well or not feeling good. So now he presses her. He says to her, no, you need to tell me what's wrong. She said, "Okay, as you're insisting, I'll tell you, I've had a horrible day." And she stops there. There's two ways to go through it. One says, "You know what, I'm not bothered." One says, "Please tell me, explain as detailed as you can." Why? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this is a message for brothers, Allah has created the female with the need to express herself and the need to be heard and the need to feel empathy. It's just the way it is. So that moment, the husband says to his wife, "Please explain to me what kind of day you've had. I want to understand. I want to feel what you're feeling." So she says, "In the morning, I was speaking to my mom and at home, and I left the food on the burner and it burnt. The food is gone. Then I got a call from the school saying our son has been behaving badly, so I need to go and see the head teacher. Then I come back home to wash the clothes and the washing machine is not working." Now, if the husband is trained and understands how Allah's created males and females differently, he will answer differently to someone who hasn't been. If they've just gone into marriage without preparation, this is how they'll answer. Please understand this. This is real scenarios. He'll say to his wife, "Don't worry about the food. We'll get Uber or we'll order food from outside. And my son, I will speak to him. I'll make sure how he's behaving, and I'll fix the washing machine. Don't worry. Are you feeling okay now?" But that's not the solution. The wife is not looking for you to fix the problems. The wife is looking for you to make her feel valued, cherished, and to feel her suffering and pain. So the right approach would be, I can't believe you had to go through all this pain. Tell me more. How did you bear with it? This must have been so difficult. And so the wife will feel that there is a connection. There is this element of the feeling that is there, understanding, because that's what she needs. Yes? She doesn't need you to be the solution provider. She could order food from outside. She could sort the kid out herself. But she's looking for you to understand her. See, this is just one example. My point is, if an individual doesn't know these, hasn't prepared, hasn't read, and this is why I encourage all communities to make sure they do courses as much as they can, to provide facilities for our youth to learn about marriage and what entails in marriage, so that they're equipped in the best possible way. And tawfiq, inshallah, is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ببركة الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد. I'd like to, as this is my final opportunity to be with my sisters and brothers here at this wonderful center, the Imam Ali Center, I'd like to, first of all, and without any comparison, because it's wrong to say, I want to thank Allah and the people. So this is a common mistake we often say. On social media, people say, I want to thank Allah, then I want to thank my parents. So you're putting Allah in the same pedestal as human beings. So be wary of that mistake. So above all and without comparison, I want to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for giving me the opportunity to be with my sisters and brothers in this holy month of Ramadan, and also express my gratitude at another level to my dear friend and colleague, Samahat Sheikh Mustafa Akhund, for his kind invitation, as well as the wonderfully hard-working team here at Imam Ali Center. Wonderful to see the youngsters working together. I hear that there are 14 of them, mashallah. I'm sure this is a number that is specially designated, but it's their hard work, their efforts, their continuous service, their hospitality, their kindness. I'm grateful to them all. Jazakumullah khairat jaza. And I'd like to ask for forgiveness from the sisters and brothers